border czar Tom Homan warning people that, hey, we're going to secure the border, but it's going to be bloody.
Once we secure the border and make it more difficult for them to make money, it's going to become violent. You're going to see violence on the border, and it's unfortunate, but we know it's coming. Border Patrol is prepared. It's great to have the military on the southern border. They're prepared. It'd be a bad move on their part to harm any Border Patrol agent or soldier, because I think President Trump will reply with great force. And I think he has the capability of wiping these cartels off the face of the earth if they harm our soldiers or Border Patrol agents. So, word of advice, I wouldn't go there.
So that's something that's not talked about very much in the United States and not on many people's radars. Can you talk to us about what Homan's talking about there, and what is the risk of bloodshed, especially could there be a war against the Mexican cartels?
We are already at war with the drug cartels in Mexico and Central America. Let's be frank, that's not news. We are already at war. They have been at war with us for decades. It has simply reached a fever pitch now. I like Tom Homan, and I wish him all the success in the world, but I am very, very skeptical of what I see happening, because I haven't seen a decisive move to do the things that need to be done. We've talked about this before. First and foremost, you must take control of the border with the U.S. Army. Certainly augment it with Marine Corps ground forces, but you've got to do that. And a military commander must be in charge, because we are at war. That's number one. Everyone in that operation should report to him, whoever he turns out to be, whoever is ultimately selected. And I'm talking about anywhere from 40, 50, 60,000 troops, depending upon the composition of the force. There has to be a systematic surveillance regime set up that looks hundreds of miles into Mexico, that is downlinked in real terms to forces on the ground. And you have to set up a barrier system. You know, all of these things have to be done systematically and thoroughly. It's what we need to do. I don't see that happening. I see incremental contributions here or there. Well, we'll put something here, we'll do this. And now threatening the cartels, the cartels are not interested. They don't care. They have almost an inexhaustible number of people that they can throw at us in all sorts of ways. They have a lot of money. They have access to some of the best military technology in the world. We'll probably end up having things like javelins shot at us before long. And we always knew that once you close that border seriously and stopped the massive flow of drugs into the United States, that you would end up having a war inside our country, because the drug cartels have penetrated the entire country. They reach into all the big cities and now into rural areas. They're going to have to be rooted out. And this is going to overlap with the removal of illegal aliens, people that have no business being in the country. And I think, as you saw recently in LA, and probably will see it soon in New York and other places, the usual suspects on the left are going to encourage these people to resist. And we can't be bothered with this. We cannot tolerate it. This is the breakdown of law and order that threatens the very existence of our civilization and society. We have to take decisive action. Now, I've said from the beginning, and I mean this sincerely, President Trump needs to do these things. But to do these things effectively, he needs to get the hell out of Eastern Europe immediately. Get those forces back to the United States. Bring back the forces from Korea. Bring back the forces from Okinawa. There's not going to be a war with China or Russia. He knows that. That's nonsense. Neither of them want a war with us. We don't want a war with them. He's making the right noises right now towards Iran. Perhaps he can head off that war. I'm not sure. It's a little late in the game now to stop the Israelis, particularly since he just announced another $1 billion of aid and equipment, virtually anything the Israelis want. And I'm sure that includes all of the munitions that they need to finish off Gaza and finish off the West Bank and potentially southern Lebanon and largely Syria. We'll have to see what happens, but you cannot do all of these things. You cannot conduct operations around the world militarily and then run the border as though it's an economy of force measure. That has to be the central focus. That's the front where we live or die as a nation.
And I wonder if you could go into a little bit of detail there, Doug, because a lot of people look at the border and they say, okay, there's some illegal immigrants coming across. We can stop that. But an actual threat to our national security. Just, a lot of people don't see it. So I wonder if you can define what that threat is that is warranted with that much military power.
Well, we're already confronting the loss of 130, 120,000 American lives every year to this fentanyl madness. That doesn't include deaths from other drugs that come into the country. So that's one part. Secondly, the mass influx of illegals has cost us billions of dollars. It's bankrupted our health system. It's an imposition, a burden on the educational system, which is in ruins in the United States. So you look at those things and back down from that and just look at criminality in general. People will say, oh, well, these aliens have only committed crimes on the same level as Americans. That's not true. And that material needs to get to the American public. But we've had an FBI, a Justice Department, that has skillfully concealed the truth from the American people for years. That's got to stop. And that's where Kash Patel comes in. We've got to tell the truth. Who's committing the criminal acts? Who are they? Where are they from? That needs to be public. And when that picture is drawn accurately, people will see we are at war. This is the same thing that you've got over in Europe in many cases, where great cities, Paris, London, Berlin, have so-called no-go areas. You can't go into them. If you go into them, you risk being killed. And those areas are populated with non-Europeans, people that have come into those countries as migrants, and now, of course, don't want to leave and go home. We're going to have a similar problem in the United States. They will not want to leave. But if we don't address this as ferociously as I'm outlining, we may not make it as a country. And President Trump should make that his top priority. That's what has to come before everything else. And then finally, we need to start looking at the criticality of integrated air defenses, not just for the whole country. That's an impossibility, but we've got to get down there on the border. We're now under attack with these drones. Our border patrolmen are, the military will be. As we ramp up and it becomes obvious what's going to happen, don't worry, the cartels will unleash everything they've got against us. And they'll work very, very hard to buy as many politicians and as many local leaders and as many sheriffs as they can in an effort to defeat us. So this has got to be our main effort if we're going to survive.
And in fact, I guess kind of toward that end, Tom Homan continued on in that same interview, outlined some things that he's thinking how maybe we can coordinate things from the southern side of the border with the Mexicans.
Do you trust the National Guard troops of Mexico that President Sheinbaum said she would put on the northern border?
Well, we'll see. I mean, under Trump's first administration, they put military on their northern and southern border, and it had a great effect. For decades, I've said many in the military, Mexican military, many in Mexican law enforcement are corrupt. And a lot of it's not by choice. Either you do what the cartels tell you to do, or they'll kill you and your family. So with our military on the border, their military on the border, the cartel's going to be hurting. Which means this: when we secure the border, less fentanyl overdose deaths in the United States, less sex trafficking of women and children, less known suspected terrorists coming across that southern border. So it's a game changer, and President Trump's moving at lightning speed.
And towards that end, he said he claims Trump's moving at lightning speed. You're suggesting that it's not 1,500, it's not going to even be a drop in the bucket, but you said 30, 40, 50,000. How would that change the military? I mean, we would probably have to build some kind of barracks or post along the southern border to house all these people, to keep them there that long, right?
Well, that's what we did for 100 years between 1846 and 1948. Go through Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California, and look at all the places that are called Fort something. That's because those were army posts. That's where the cavalry regiments were quartered, and infantry regiments. After World War I, the main focus of the United States Army at the time was war in Mexico. And that was because we saw that the Mexicans eagerly adopted the Germans as allies during the war and allowed German influence to penetrate. We also saw subsequently that they sided with the communists, with the Soviet Union. We also saw that they provided training opportunities and support for Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. They're not our friends. Now, to answer the question that came up first, I'm surprised Tom Homan just didn't say no. We cannot trust the federal Mexican troops. Of course not. Absolutely not. We can't match the funds that they can receive from the cartels. The Mexican government is a joke. Forget it. Anything they say is ludicrous nonsense. The cartels are in charge. They are the enemy. They have the money. They run Mexico. We've got to get over this silly nonsense and understand what's real. Now, I'm not here condemning the Mexican population. The Mexican population wants to survive. It's adapting to survive. And the setups that the cartels offer to them are not all evil. You get free dental care if you're serving in a particular cartel in a particular area. All sorts of strange things like this. They're not going to come to your aid. They're not going to help us. We're not going to get any help out of Mexico whatsoever. That's why the border must be secured. It must be closed. I don't give a damn if everything coming out of Mexico is stopped permanently on the northern border, at least as long as until we decide to admit anything else. It's going to get bad, but we're already at war. If I were advising President Trump, I would urge him to think carefully about declaring war on the drug cartels in Mexico as a first step.
Well, that apparently is something that he is considering, and Tom Homan, as I understand, is an advocate of that. But that will require, as you said earlier, a lot of changes because we can't keep all these troops we have all abroad in all these places, done things like Syria, Somalia, and every other place, and do this as well. We just don't have the resources to do that. So there's going to have to be some changes there too. But
Dan, you and I served together in the past on the Czechoslovak and East German borders. We were in organizations, military establishments that knew how to secure borders, knew how to provide surveillance, knew how to provide rapid reaction forces. I don't know if all of that has been lost, but my point is, beware of anyone in uniform who steps forward and says, this is bad. This will harm our readiness to fight. That's a lot of nonsense. If you wanted to look at something that harmed our readiness to fight, think back on the last 20 years of stupidity in the Middle East, the waste of human life, and the loss of over $14 trillion. That all needs to stop. That's why we need to get out. We need to get out of Syria. We need to get out of the whole damn place once and for all. We're not going to fix it. So let's not try and get out of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, the issue is just defend our country and our way of life. That's what we should do. Well, listen, Doug, we really appreciate this. Has been a pretty enlightening and lively engagement today, and stuff that I think, if you're right, it's going to start hitting the mainstream press at some point, whether anybody wants it to or not. So it's something we have to address, and we appreciate you coming on and doing just that.
Right. Thanks very much, Dan.
All right. Thank you very much. And we also thank you guys for joining us today. As a reminder, we're on, we have podcasts as well. Larry Johnson's going to be here. Don't want to forget that. That's at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Larry's always got some great stuff to say with former CIA intel analyst. Also to remind you that we have a podcast as well. Some people can't watch on the video, but they love to listen. And so if you or your friends do podcasts, then by all means, let them know that Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, everywhere you get your podcast, just type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive and you'll find us waiting there for you. In the meantime, thank you very much. Do like and subscribe on your way out if you haven't done that yet, so you can keep getting more good content like this, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised. We will bring you the truth that you need for your life, no matter what it is. Thank you very much. We'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.